want to see something really scary?
You bet.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Jesus Christ!
No, it's not.
Now, was that civilized? No, clearly not. Fun, but in no sense civilized.
Welcome back to another horrific helping of Deep Cuts, the show that cuts deep into the heart of horror. And for this edition, we are pointing our bloodshot gaze at one of the most essential elements of the horror genre, an element that has been a cornerstone of this genre for more than a century, and yet has never been given the credit it deserves, not just in horror, but in movies on the whole. And if you clicked on this video, you know what that element is. Women. Whether you're cognizant of this fact or not, women have played a vital role in the horror genre, both in the scenes and behind them, and they have done so for longer than many could ever have possibly imagined, or for that matter, have ever been willing to give credit. Well, Deep Cuts is a new show, and we're gonna make sure that the early days of this show gives the credit where it is so richly due. However, straight white males such as myself talking about female representation in the horror genre would probably be about as effectual and as apt as Mitch McConnell giving a speech on the importance of black lives at the Apollo. So, I defer the discussion of this wholly substantial topic to two people whose opinion have considerably more value than my own. One you know, and are obligated to love as my substantially better half Lynn, and our good friend and fellow horror authority, Tally Smith, from the all-new and all-entertaining YouTube channel, The Creeptique. Liking, sharing, and subscribing to her channel are an absolute must. Watch this video, and you will see why. So, without further ado...
Women in horror. This is, it comes up a lot. There's always a panel at every convention called Women in Horror. There's always an episode on podcasts and documentaries and
YouTube.
Women in horror. How do you feel about that?
Women have been in horror from the inception of when horror existed. Why are we still talking about it as if it's a new fucking thing? Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, so...
I agree. So I've been going back and watching a lot of older horror films, stuff that either I haven't seen since I was a kid or I've never been able to see. And in looking them up, I am surprised and blown away that so many women are behind these films, not just acting in them. I mean, you have writers, directors, producers that are women that have been in horror for decades. The fact that we still have to show up and say, hey, we're in horror, I'm in horror. It's almost a little disparaging, but at the same time, I can't ignore it until society catches up and is like, oh yeah, it's the same. There is no gender. It is just people in horror doing horror.
I feel like it's almost a subjective thing with society, is that society looks down at horror in general. We all know this. This is just the thing. It looks at it as cheap, low level, nothing. As a result, I think also it just associates that it's against women, that women aren't part of it. I mean, let's be real. Women are hardly a part of mainstream society of Hollywood, with action films and dramas and whatnot. So they just equate, oh, well, it's the same with that. And this is crap, so it's even crappier. And don't even look into the details of, oh, by the way, great directors, women of all kinds, have started in horror. Because you all aren't giving them a chance in big stream Hollywood, so guess where they go? And they do very well and end up winning Oscars in the future.
Catherine Bigelow, Near Dark is so good. I mean, she's one of those that I feel like it's not just genre. Any film she does, it doesn't feel like this is a woman film. No, it's a good film that happens to be done by a woman. I still think that there's a problem with in horror, women having opportunities to make. It's still obviously very skewed towards men, but you're right. There's women have always been part of this genre, and I think that's part of why, as a woman, I felt drawn to it since I was a little kid. You see women fighting back, and that just, you don't see that as often in other genres.
You know, I mean, let's be real. Horror, you see women fight back. You see them as the main characters. You know, you can associate with that. It's not just about, oh, I just want to watch a mask killer kill. It's like sometimes you want to see Laurie Strode's, Nancy, Alice, so forth, fight back.
That, I guess, leads us into the whole idea of the final girl, which is interesting. It's a trope I love in sort of a guilty pleasure way. And when I was a kid, it wasn't a guilty pleasure. That's what, you know, made me want to get into martial arts, made me want to be the tough girl. So I grew up loving Sidney Prescott and Nancy Wheeler, and that's who I wanted to be. And now that I'm an adult, it's almost, I'm starting to see behind the curtain, and it's like, wait, why do women even need a term? You don't see that in other genres of film. If the woman is the lead or the hero or the survivor, there's not a term for it. Why do we have to be an anomaly just because we survived?
Why called Final Girl? Like, how many of these films have many survivors, not just one person? 2, why are they always called the girl? Most of the time they're adults, 18 plus, they're a woman. 3, sometimes they're, all right, so a guy is the main lead. Okay, that's fine, but they don't put final boy on him. But they do with a girl. Like, well, it's just the hero. Is that not, or the protagonist? You have a film, you have an antagonist, you have a protagonist. Why can't you just call them the protagonist, the hero? Why do you have to call them a final girl as if women are the target of slaughter? Like, well, you survived. No, she's the hero. She took him out. I want to go home. I feel like that's part of society's, like, the second something positive comes through, like Laurie Strode, she kicked butt. She fought against Michael Myers, and it was amazing. They couldn't let her just be a hero. They have to knock it down. Like, it's Hollywood. I don't know if it's Hollywood society or a combo of the two. Could not allow the idea that, hey, heroic female. Woo.
There is definitely something nice to rally under the banner of the final girl. I mean, you know, got my pins and everything. I love being the fucking final girl. It's sort of, as a woman, here's my camp. But at the same time, when you step outside that camp, there's such a bigger world, and it's like, why do we have to be separated? You know, you look at top 10 lists of best horror movie directors. If you look at just the horror movie directors, it's mostly guys. In order to find the women directing and writing these horror films, you have to find the women in horror list, which is what I as you said, I've been here this whole time. One of the movies that I saw recently, it was from 1982, Slumber Party Massacre, which sounds and looks like it would be the most derogatory thing in the world. It was written, produced, and directed by women. And it's a movie about these girls having to come together and get over whatever female pettiness is going on and take down this asshole guy that's killing them. And even the other guys in the movies are total damsels, and they're all worthless. It's the women who, when they realize they band together, it's 1982. I mean, that is the kind of film that we need. As hilarious as it is to say Slumber Party Massacre is a movie we need, but, like, you know, why does that get brushed under the rug? Why aren't we talking about things like that? That is what the building blocks of horror is to me, is women being there, women fighting. And yet, as you said, I get knocked down a peg because it's the final girl.
Or, I mean, with Slumber Party Massacre, for example, no one even considers the metaphoric aspects of the film. That it has a lot of layers to it. They just go, oh, it's a guy killing some girls. And it's like, did you watch the film? Did you even the poster kind of gives away what the film's actually trying to say. I also think is that people don't realize it's directed by a woman. Like, women are behind it. They think it's exploitation, guys exploiting women, and that's what they're going for because that's the automatic response to anything in Hollywood, anything in horror. It's guys exploiting women. Look at the name on the box, you dumbass. Like, no, it's not. It's actually a lot deeper, and women have been part of horror for centuries at this point.
Yes.
And have a voice. And oftentimes, because people don't give a lot of clout to horror films and horror genre in general, that's where their voice can be heard.
I think that Hollywood still needs to catch up with that. There's less opportunities for women than there are men, and that's just a known fact, and it's terrible. So that's why I am still gung-ho about doing a woman in horror video. I will still do this shit until we don't need to do this shit anymore. I'd love to bring up the anthology film XX. It's all women doing each little short in that, which is great. But at the same time, it's also like, well, why do women need their own anthology? I'm glad we're doing it. I'm glad that there's an opportunity to see and hear the voices of these women directors that I probably otherwise wouldn't, have seen anything by them. So we're going to keep doing it. But the goal is, the idea is that, one day we don't have to be here touting about women in horror.
I think that's the ultimate goal, is that it shouldn't be a thing. Shouldn't be, but it's still a thing. And as long as it's a thing, we should bring it up until it's not a thing. I mean, I love heroic female characters. I mean, absolutely. But one that everyone likes to reference, I mean, she began with a horror film that we all know and love, Ripley from Alien. People actually do refer to her as a hero. Unlike, they don't actually call her a final girl, even though her first film was technically a horror film. Like, Alien is a horror film.
It wasn't supposed to be a woman cast in that role in the beginning. It was written for a guy. But Sigourney Weaver is just so fucking badass that I don't really know how that change happened, but I know that it ended up with Ripley becoming a woman instead of the dude as it was written as. And yet it doesn't change anything. In a way, to me, the movie sort of is better that way, because the villain is a woman. It's about aliens impregnating all these dudes and then having a woman be the one who fights back. It's kind of awesome in showing femininity in both roles, both as the villain and the hero who overcomes it.
Especially gets more complicated with the second film, where it's the Mother Queen versus, because with Alien, I mean, the alien species impregnates and a man is the first victim. And Ripley's the voice of reason the whole time.
You also forgot the Science Division's basic quarantine law.
No, that I didn't forget.
Oh, I see. You just broke it.
She is the hero, and in the end, she's the survivor because she's the smartest person. She did everything correctly. Yes. And it's never brought up that she's a woman. It's not identified. And the thing is, I think that's the ultimate idea of what we want, which is women being just treated as everybody else and not seen as a victim, not seen as anything more than what everyone else is.
Yes. And that you don't have to be, being a strong woman doesn't mean literally now you have to do all these fucking push-ups and get jacked like Sarah Connor in T2. I love Sarah Connor in T2.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be this like hardened masculine soldier in order to be the strong female. And that's what I love about Ripley and Alien. She didn't really become a fighter until that was the last straw and she was forced into that corner. But as you said, she survived because she was smart, because she, followed directions.
Even the later films, she's smart. She doesn't like, I love you, Sarah Connor, and I love Linda Hamilton. Like, she's,
yes,
I love her. But I do take issue with strong females, and they have to almost take on masculine qualities to be a strong female. It's like, no, strength isn't here. It does not matter what this is.
Yes.
And Ripley, I think, embodies that. I think a lot of the, I hate to say it, final girls all embody that. They all embody strength and take on the villain or the antagonist or whatever situation they're in. It might not even be a person. People don't want to accept that. And I think that's ingrained by society, by centuries of garbage treatment of women as well as minorities, to think you can't be as strong as this. And even to the point where there's clear evidence that that's not the case, you're still taught that. Like, if you watch all the Jason movies, a powerful, strong female is the one that takes out Jason almost the majority of the time. Yet everyone thinks Jason just kills women and that's it. Did you watch them? Because clearly no, that's not the case.
Yeah. No, he does not care if it's guys or
He
girls.
doesn't care, but his kill count are mostly a bunch of dudes, and women are the ones taking him out.
Yep.
Hell, the first movie was his mom was the killer.
Which and that's a great thing to bring up too. I love the idea the women can be portrayed in so many different ways. And that's what I think a lot of people forget, is that they don't have to be super buff and strong in order to be the strong hero. They can also be villains though, and they don't have to be overly sexualized to be the villain. It can be this sweet little old lady in her sweater that is the most diabolical, evil person slicing and dicing all these teenagers.
With the biggest man hands I've ever seen in my life, but I'm not going to judge.
That is,
I'm never going to say that Pamela Voorhees don't have got some big old man hands. I love it though.
You killed my son. And now I kill you, and I can't think of anything more rational.
Yeah,
Mrs. Loomis.
And bumbling
too.
salt. Oh, she was great. But I say, like, oh, you don't have to be sultry, but you can be that too. And that's what I love about the idea of women, is that every incarnation is valid, because then you got a movie like Jennifer's Body, where you have the two different roles of how women are and how they want to behave, not like how necessarily society makes them. But like Megan Fox, she's fucking gorgeous and she knows it, and she wants to wear her tight little jeans and do herself. And you have Amanda Seyfried, who is a little more mousy, and she just doesn't want to be over sexualized. And yet the idea is both of these are valid ways to be, and I like that.
Different. People can be different. And if you want to be proud of your body, you want to be sexual, you don't want to be sexual, it's fine. But it falls into society, I think, is telling women you have to be a certain way, but then they'll punish you for being that way. So if you are told you have to be this way, like if you're sexy, you're valid, but we're going to punish you. If you're mousy, well, we're going to still punish you because you're a prude. You're punished on every angle, but all variations are valid, just as much as all variations of men are valid. If a guy wants to strip his shirt off and just stand there in his tighty whities that no one says anything, I mean, they might laugh, but
Yeah, but I love the idea that horror is really the only genre where you get to see all the different roles of women, regardless of whether or not they're the hero or the villain. You have Elvira, and you have all the way down to the cast of The Craft.
Girls, watch out for those weirdos.
We are the weirdos, mister.
Each one of them is so different. And horror allows you to have that. It's not like watching a rom-com, whereas you said, the moment you see a woman step into the camera, just by the way she's lit and how she's dressed, you already know what her role is in the film. And there's never another option. Whereas in horror, you get all of that.
And with horror, you also get actual camaraderie between women that doesn't revolve specifically around men. They will talk about anything, just anything. Whereas, your rom-coms or whatever, they're always talking about getting a man. In horror, at best, they might be talking about killing man. I don't know. It depends on the film. But they'll talk about other things, which is like, oh, you like life. I mean, with The Craft, you have 4 girls of completely different backgrounds, all connecting together because of similar feelings, which, shocker, that is actually a realistic thing. And you actually feel for all the characters, even Nancy, who goes off the rails, but you can't blame her. You're also like, yeah, I hear you, girl. You know, I get it. You know, if I got all that power, I can't blame you for what you're doing, you know?
Ginger Snaps, and how it sort of does the same thing. It's showing these 2 sisters that are very different, and yet both are completely valid ways of being, whether you are more accepting of your sexuality or you're just not ready for that yet. I mean, that's such a great film, though. I like, because it does display a lot of puberty of being a girl without shying away from it, which I think is cool. And you're just not really going to get that in any other genre. You know, showing she has her period, and this isn't a weird thing. It gets weird when it's interlaced with, oh shit, she might also be a werewolf.
You think I want to go back to being nobody?
And that's the beauty of horror, is that it allows you to play in those worlds because you're with the supernatural and stuff. So you're allowed to take things that any other genre or field makes weird, even though it's totally everyday for someone like me. That's weird. But in the horror world, it gets to be normal again because you're dealing with all this other weirdo bullshit.
Personal opinion, like when we were talking about, you know, heroic female characters, this was a latter film I saw in my years, and it just hit me hard. Was Texas Chainsaw 2, A Stretch.
Yes.
Was is ultimately one of my favorite heroic female characters of horror of all time. Primarily is because showing that women not only are just survivors, they also think on their feet. It's not just about fighting physically, which does happen. It's fighting psychologically. It's also understanding people. And that film, I mean, there's the infamous scene where Stretch utilizes knowing certain people's weaknesses and psychologically messes with them to get out of a situation. And it's showing like the power of what a woman knows, also understanding reality in society of how it's viewed to survive, and not only survive, take down the bad guys. I don't think enough credit is given to women for understanding reality. Like I think women are, because of how things have been so in society, you know, so difficult, are more aware than you think. And I think more aware than people think, and are implementing that into stories or performances if they're not the actual directors and such.
Well, every day for a woman, unfortunately, at least I can't speak for the whole world, but here in America, every day is an opportunity for a horror film. I walk down the street just to the grocery store to pick up something, and you know, even if I'm not wearing makeup and I'm dressed in an oversized sweatshirt, I still can feel certain eyes on me. And it has nothing to do with beauty. Women are always going to get catcalled no matter where they go. You get berated if you're not smiling at total strangers, even though it's like people just don't walk around smiling. Like I'm thinking, I'm in my head. There's so many opportunities. And that's not even going to the extremes about how women are more often, not always, but more often the victims of kidnapping, of rape, and all this stuff, just walking down the street. Every day is sort of flirting with that line of a horror film for us, which is why I think it's so interesting or frustrating that women are sort of the othered in horror, because oh man, no, we live it. And that's where you get to see it in the horror films themselves, with the actresses, the writers, the directors. They get to ingrain all of this, and there's just that added layer of realness to, I think, a lot of these horror films.
You nailed it. Is that why women's contributions to horror is so severe and so important is because women on a whole do experience horror in the real world more so than men. I mean, not saying all, of course, but yeah, try and go out there. I mean, granted, now you're wearing a mask, so maybe you're not going to be asked to smile, but then again, who knows? How often are you going to be told, honey, shut up? What? Don't even get online. Because if you're a woman, you're not allowed to have a voice. And if you do, it's political. Same with horror. I mean, women have had voices in horror for decades again. And people pretend like it's not been there the whole time.
As frustrating as it is at times, I think that there's also a lot that we get to celebrate and get to recognize. I mean, gosh, some of the best films we said, the Soka sisters, they're working together doing what Rabid, American Mary, those two bringing stuff together. Jackie Kong did Blood Diner, and that Jackie Kong's amazing. She's a person of color, which is even like a smaller slice of the pie. I mean, you can talk about in that vein, Jada Pinkett in Demon Knight, who I never saw as like, here's a woman of color. It's always look at this badass in this film.
But it's still a major fact is she is a woman of color. Like, as much as we might not have thought about it when we were watching it back in the 90s or whenever, that's a big deal. There's an amazing documentary on Shudder called Horror Noir, which focuses on the Black community in horror and just goes across the entire board. They have a great section about women of color and the representation, how they're portrayed. And it's by people of color and their viewpoints. And Jada Pinkett is brought up in it, and it's really intense. And the sad part is you sit back and think about it, and you're like, for American made films, obviously, we not speaking of other countries, that's a problem too. Women of color just are not getting opportunities. And if they are, I mean, they are a little bit more now, but still it's very little. I mean, we have Jordan Peele's Us, which fantastic.
Yeah, you have Lupita Nyong'o, who's amazing. She's a mother, who's fighting back, saving her family. Like, we need more of that stuff. Obviously, I think your documentary is a great thing to watch. We are both white, can't quite preach from a place of knowing, but I wish I could just see more of this on TV. I wish there was more of this around us. I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't mention the new remake of Candyman.
My victim.
This is not real. It's not real.
She will be directing Captain Marvel too.
Oh, I'm so excited.
That also kind of explains also that filming in horror films can get you more exposure to. I mean, Catherine Bigelow did Near Dark and then does Heartwalker and wins an Oscar. The startup also of opportunities, because again, I always say horror is not given enough clout in the Hollywood scene as much, even if it's making money, because it actually makes, I think, more money than most films because they're so cheap.
Yeah.
And it's the best place to get your opportunities to kind of make your way up. Even with male directors, that's a lot. Start there and move up.
Yeah, you've got horror in every genre. It's touching on everything. That's, I think, why it's so appealing to so many people, is because there's so many different facets of it. But something that's in every single one of those facets will always be women and the idea of femininity and what it means to different people. And although we still need to bridge that gap, we still need society to catch up with it, being more even with dudes, there's still so much to celebrate. And even now, I'm going back through old classics, old not classics, and finding women in the most surprising places. And that's what I would really like to keep digging up more of and giving recognition to. No, women have always been here in horror. We were here when it started. And until society and Hollywood and whatever catches up and realizes, hey, we're just creators, just enjoy. Go research, go check it out, and actually find out. You're going to be quite surprised how many women are behind the films that you have been watching for years. Yes.
And respect that and understand the voice that exists.